Well, welcome to tonight's SCORE workshop, Business Planning. My name is Ken Ehlers. I am a SCORE volunteer. For those of you who aren't familiar with SCORE, although it sounds like many of you are, we're a nonprofit organization, a resource partner with for the Small Business Administration. We're 100% volunteer based. We have two areas of focus: one-on-one mentoring, which is provided by experienced business owners and executives, and also our educational workshop program, which of course you're participating at one of those this evening. The bottom line is we're really here to help local small business any way we can. And if you'd like any additional information, please check out our website at piedmont.score.org. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Ron Kuprowski is a longtime member and past chairman of Piedmont SCORE. He has been recognized for his significant contributions to our organization over the years, and we are indeed fortunate to have him as the instructor for tonight's workshop. Before retiring, Ron was managing director for the Forum Corporation, an international consulting and training company. He previously worked for Chase Manhattan Bank with roles in community and small business banking, asset-based finance, global leadership development, and service quality. Prior to Chase, he held management positions at United Airlines in the areas of sales, service, operations, human resources, and leadership development. He's a man of many long experience and many talents. Without further delay, please welcome Ron Kuprowski.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, whenever I listen to an introduction like that, it's long experience. I'll admit to that. Many talents. Sometimes I question that myself, but hopefully I can present some ideas here about business planning tonight that you'll find useful, and base it on a lot of the experiences that I've had. A couple things as we begin. I'm going to, at the end of this presentation, refer you to Piedmont SCORE's website once again, and a couple links on that website where you can get some of the tools and the outlines that I'll be talking about. The other excellent source for business planning is the Small Business Administration's website. They are at sba.gov. And what's great about the SBA site is they take a business at each stage of its development, from beginning through growth period, through stabilization, through divesting yourself of a business. And it has all sorts of tools, articles, and information that you might find useful. So in addition to the Piedmont SCORE website, I'd refer you to the sba.gov website for your information. Most of you are on mute, but if you have a question, use the chat function, and Ken will sort of screen some of those. And if I miss a point or need to cover something, he'll remind me of it. If you feel that you want to chime in during parts of this presentation, I think there are few enough of us on here that we can do it without making it too cumbersome. If it gets that way, then I'll ask you to just stick with the chat function. So let me begin talking about business planning, and I'm going to go through a slide deck, and here's the agenda. Are you all seeing the PowerPoint that has the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. Here are the four things that in general that I'd like to cover. The first thing is to understand planning around an idea versus creating a business. Oops. And as sometimes happens, the timing on these things doesn't always work. So I'm going to talk about an idea versus a business concept or a business idea. And then why do you want to plan? What are the benefits of business planning? And then from there, I'm going to talk about the lean canvas form and a formal business plan. Those two, sorry, I have this on a timer here and I'm not talking fast enough. I think most of you were sent the lean canvas format, but we'll send it afterwards if you don't have a copy. And then finally, I'm going to talk about some templates and online tools that might be useful for you. So first of all, a key concept or key understanding that I'd encourage all of you to be aware of. Nobody owns an idea. I can't tell you over the years how many people have come into SCORE and sat down and said, I have this great idea to take a food truck and sell this great chili burgers that I've created, and everybody that comes to my barbecues loves them. So I want to have a food truck and go out and do that. That's an idea. They want to somehow craft that idea, but the idea itself isn't the business. You have to take that idea and operationalize it. Now there's an operator error here. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know why that won't stay. Anyway, how do you make lemon out of a lemon? Or if you have a life of lemons, that idea of a lemon isn't operational until you can send it. Ken, are you, can you control by any chance this?
I'm sorry, Ron, what?
I'm going to go into this mode, folks, because it's not quite as elegant, but it's will work better here for us. So an idea you can't protect, you can't sell it on itself. You have to operationalize it into something that's tangible. So the idea of a lemon and making lemonade in and of itself isn't saleable. You have to turn that lemon into lemonade, set up a lemonade stand and sell it before you have a business. And the planning is around that transition from what your concept is into all the elements that make a business tangible and able to make money. Ideas in and of themselves have no legal protection. This is the other thing to be aware of. A lot of people say, well, I have this great idea for an online business. It's going to compete with Facebook. How do I protect that idea? You can't protect the idea. It doesn't have any basis for legal protection. The way you can protect items for a business, they have to be tangible. So for example, patents cover things like inventions, algorithms, formulas, but they're tangible elements, not just something blue sky that in terms of a concept or an idea. Copyrights protect creative works, and normally they're artistic, music, literature, artworks and that, but copyrights protect those sorts of products or outputs that you can then sell. Your logos, your brands, your phrases, your images can be protected with trademarks, but again, you need that tangible trademark or the phrase or the image that you submit to the government for registration before it can be protected. A lot of businesses fail because they haven't thought through, how do I move from that concept or idea into some type of tangibles that my business is going to operate, how I'm going to go after my customers, how am I going to finance this business. Just to give you some sense of where businesses are and why businesses fail. The SBA a number of years ago did some research on business and business failures. They wanted to see what their clients, what the success rate was. And it was a little bit discouraging, because when you look at it, after the first year, 20% of the companies fail because they typically run out of money or there is some other issue. After 5 years, 50% of those companies that started have failed for one reason or another. And then it's at 10 years, you only see about 30% of those companies that started out with still in operations. And they explored in this study by the SBA as to why companies failed. And they looked at, they saw 4 things that really bubbled to the top. Number one was lack of planning. There wasn't a clear direction with key planning elements in terms of why a business should be operating and how it was going to operate and how it was going to make money. The second issue for a lot of companies was that they ran out of money. They just didn't have a plan that really developed a clear understanding and a clear forecast of how much money they were going to need to build their product, how much money they needed to market their product, and how much money they needed to maintain inventory and a supply of product for their customers over time. The third thing is that they failed because they failed to market effectively. One of the biggest challenges I see in the clients that I've met with over the years is when you ask them, who is your customer? Who is going to buy this from you? Whatever it is, the product, the service, the online offering, and that they don't have a clear definition of who their customer is. And if they've done work on identifying their customer, they haven't thought about how they're going to market or sell to that customer effectively and at the lowest possible cost. And then finally, the fourth thing is that owner manager lacks experience in terms of the specific line of business. If you have been an accountant all of your life and decide you want to open a food truck but have no experience in the food business, that's a tough challenge for you, and it will be a tough challenge for you in terms of starting that business, because there are all sorts of issues around food production, spoilage, temperature of the food that you sell, all of these issues that somebody who has experience in the food business would know, but you may not know as an accountant unless you've studied it very closely. The second thing is that a lot of owner managers have failed because they just lack the skills in managing tasks and or people. That owner manager and experience in these 2 areas really stands out in terms of contributing to failure. But again, things to be aware of and the rationale for planning. So why plan? What's the benefits of planning? So first of all, again, this is from a lot of the Small Business Administration research that they've done over the years. Companies that have a clear plan that identifies their customers, their offerings, the channels that they're going to go after the customer with tend to grow 30% faster than those without a clear plan. And again, it just makes sense. If you have a roadmap as to where you want to go, and you've laid out the stops, the fuel stops, the rest stops, and so on, you're more likely to get to that goal or that destination you want to than if you haven't made those plans and everything becomes a random event as you work towards your goal. Second thing is that most newly formed businesses that have a plan are, particularly when you're starting out, are more likely to succeed in their first year. And the statistics are 60% more likely to succeed. And that's a powerful statement that says if you're going to start out a business, sit down and take the time, even if it's that 1-page lean canvas worksheet, but it lays out, again, the key elements of what you need to do to launch your business. Third thing is, in terms of why planning, those small business owners that have launched their business and they're out in the marketplace and everything, they were asked what they do differently in that. And 67% of them said they'd write a better business plan. And it's not so much that the grammar or the context would be that much different, but that they would develop more clarity around their customers, their operational elements, and a lot around what they do in terms of their capital requirements and the cash flow requirements that they had in the business. And finally, the last piece, and this is fairly powerful here, entrepreneurs who complete a business plan were 2.6 times more likely to start their business than those who did not complete their plan. So those of you that are listening that are don't have a business, but you're thinking about launching it, if you have a business plan, you're more likely to go ahead and start your business than those folks that haven't done anything at this point in time. We'll see if this works. I'm going to do this. All right, this is hopefully you're seeing SBA.gov. It says 10 steps to start your business.
No, I see business plan SBA resource guide.
Right. And that's 10.
It didn't lead to a link.
It didn't lead to a link.
It didn't. No.
All right, so that's not working. The SBA site, what I was going to say is, I was going to just show you an example of the page to the SBA site. So
you're probably sharing your screen, I mean your PowerPoint rather than your screen, so we can't see a new window open.
all right, I thought. Well, I'm going to go on because I can't seem to do that. We'll come back to the SBA site a little bit later. Let me now move into business planning proper here. So I've just talked briefly about ideas you can't make money on ideas. You have to translate them into a concept and take that concept and craft a plan around it. All right, we're getting out of this. I don't have timing set, but I don't know why whenever I go into this mode. My apologies, folks. Most of our clients that we find don't need a full business plan. A lot of them just need a way of framing their ideas to create a concept so that they can have a profitable business, and often need help just creating a roadmap. So we're going to talk about two things here: a formal business plan, which is a multi-page, detailed marketing operations. It depending on the type of business, it can be anywhere from 8 to 10 pages to a book of 20, 30, 40 pages or more for a small business. The challenge is that if you intend to borrow money and get financing, you'll need a formal business plan. For many people, though, starting out, we recommend the Lean Canvas format as a starting point. And again, I think all of you were sent a copy of that in the last couple of days, the template just to take a look at. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about that template because it's a useful tool, and it's it's a way of actually outlining your concept and your customer needs. And from that, you can actually develop a more formalized plan. So let me start with the lean canvas then. This works for new businesses. It's a great way to test a concept or a new idea. And I think a couple of you are in business already and are talking about maybe taking your business to the next level. One of the things to do is with the lean canvas, you can test that idea before you go into a formalized business plan or a more formal business plan. For those of you that are starting new or from scratch, I'd recommend the lean plan format as a way of just capturing your ideas in one place on one page. And then from there, you can test the feasibility of your idea for your business and whether you have clarity about the kinds of things that you can do in that business to make money and the steps that you have to take then for a more formal plan. And again, the canvas is great for all businesses because it really helps you lay out a roadmap that's pretty reasonable.
Hey, Ron, I think a participant may have a question. Yolanda, do you have a question you want to ask Ron?
Come off mute.
Yolanda? Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have a question right now.
Okay, I saw that you raised your hand, so.
Yeah, I did that by accident. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about the new business journey and that businesses basically exist to solve customer problems. And a customer is willing to pay you money to solve their problem. A couple things that happen there. There's a problem, you have a solution, and a customer is willing to pay you money. If you have those three elements, you have the beginning of a business. Each one of these steps along the way is tied to the lean plan format. And I'll go through each one of those, but the lean canvas format, those of you that have the form in front of you can take a look at it and see that it starts with what's the customer problem you're trying to solve. An example of that might be somebody who's looking at a pest control business. This particular client said, and I'll read here, a pest control application has become a big and franchise business. Applications are becoming increasingly time efficient and impersonal. Certain homeowners miss the personal service connection provided by people they know and they can trust. So it's that personal service, that trust element, that personal knowledge of the provider in the pest control business that's defining the problem for this particular business in that. Who has the problem? It really talks there about your customer segments. Do you have, again, in the pest control business, it might be those people that have exterior pests, interior pests, termites, pests on their vegetation out in their yard. There are a variety of segments. And so defining who those customer segments are becomes critical in terms of developing your business and focusing your marketing effort. Then who will pay for solutions now? The now is the operative word in that step 3. And those are the pioneer adopters. Who are going to be the first customers you have and that are willing to test out your idea or to pay you money to try your service in that. I had a client a couple of years ago who wanted to open a home delivery vegan food business. So she was setting up a business for vegan meals. She'd prepare the meals, you could order them online, and then she would deliver those meals to you based on your online order. And then ultimately she wanted to become or to have it operate on a subscriber basis, and that to find out who her pioneer adopters or early adopters would be to try it out, she went to a number of organizations around town that were vegan oriented. She went to holistic medical practitioners that emphasize vegan diets and that. And so those were two channels that she focused on early on to test her idea, to market test the solution before she went all out in her marketing efforts in that. But that's an example of an early adopter in terms of this lean canvas template here. What's the competition? You know, who are the existing solutions for your business right now? It's rare that someone starts a business where someone else is not already doing the same thing. And so you want to see who your competitors are and what is their solution? How are they approaching the solution in the marketplace? What do they have that you can either differentiate yourself around, or what are they doing, or what are your strengths that you can carve out a new perspective on the problem or the issue that your customers may not have seen before. Studying the competition is really a key element, and I would encourage all of you, whatever business you're thinking about, is to shop your customers first or your competitors first. What do they do that's good? What do they do that's poor? And then how can you compete against them by doing something better or different than what they're doing? You won't know that unless you really do study your competitors in that. And then as you do that, you develop your own solution. So what is your solution? Why is it better? How do you differentiate yourself? Differentiation is a key term that I would encourage all of you to embed in your plan and in your mind as you start to develop a plan for your business. Always thinking about who is my customer, who is my competitor, how am I different in solving my customer's problem or my customer's issue, and that. And that's what the next several steps on the Lean Canvas template is then all about. How do I create value? What's my unique value proposition? How am I going to state that and communicate that to my customers? And then how do I communicate my competitive advantage to them? Number 7, and I'm assuming again that all of you have seen this Lean Canvas template when you signed up for this workshop, and probably was sent to you in the last day or two. But number 8 on the canvas is basically an elevator speech. But how do you describe your business? One of the things that as an entrepreneur, you'll find yourself doing is people are going to be saying, well, tell me about your business. And normally, you should be able to describe your business with clarity and concisely. And it's called an elevator speech because this concept was developed in New York, in New York City. And the elevator speech is how long it takes you to go from the ground floor up to the 50th floor of an office building in New York City. And that's about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. So an elevator speech is in that amount of time. Can you describe your business, who you serve, what their problem is, what your solution is and why you're better than your competition. And I'd encourage all of you to spend time on that elevator speech, because you're going to have to use it with customers, with suppliers, with lenders, with relatives that are going to help support your business, and that anyone else who might have an interest in your business. Now let's talk a little bit more about customers. 9 and 10, or 9 on the Lean Canvas form is about the channels of distribution. So there you talk about how are you going to get to your various target customers? What kinds of advertising, print material, marketing efforts, online efforts, direct sales calls are you going to use to go after your customers? Channels are all of those pathways that you and your customer connect with one another. And with technology, with the internet, and that they've become infinitely more robust in terms of your being able to access customers. But again, it goes back to real clarity about who your customers are. And the clearer you are about who your customer segments are, number 2 on your lean chart or lean canvas, the better you can use your channels of distribution to get to those customers. And that let's see, what else would I say about channels? Channels will vary based on your business, your customer, and your value proposition. So if you have a food truck, your channel of distribution is going to be different than if you have the online vegan meals where people order online. The food truck, you're going to have to probably deal with more local kind of advertising. If you set up your food truck out in front of a plant, for example, which one of my clients did, he worked with the human resource manager at the facility, or the manager of the facility, so that they would have a notice within the plant about when the food truck would be there. Every Thursday afternoon, if you want to go out, there's a food truck out there. Online work probably wouldn't, or online channel wouldn't be very effective for him. The vegan food distribution, the online ordering, the online payment mechanism, all of that made sense to do it via the internet and that. So different channels based on different customers, different value proposition for that. At this point, you then start talking about revenue streams. Where is my money coming from? How do I make a sale? How do I get paid? How do I make delivery? But what are the value or the revenue streams that are going to be coming in to me? Just recently had a customer or a client who is opening a small furniture store, and she has a target market segment that she's going after of young professionals who are willing to shop online. They want good quality furniture. They don't have a lot to invest in furniture, though, because they're early in their work careers. So versus typical furniture buy of $10,000 to furnish a home, they're talking about $2,000. So she talked about revenue streams for that customer base. And she defined 4. There's the living room furniture, sofa, chairs, tables, lamps, bedroom furniture, which are, again, beds, dressers, and that was one, or second revenue stream. Third revenue stream was mattresses and box spring. From her experience, and she's been in the business for a while, a lot of people starting out will buy the box spring and mattress before they buy the bed, which might be a later purchase. So they'll have the box spring and mattress on the floor until they can afford to buy the bed. And then the third area is dining furniture, so dining table, chairs, and so on. Those were the 4 revenue streams that she had in her business that helped her define with clarity what her costs were for product, what her potential revenue is based on the markup of those products for each of those 4 streams. So that was number 10 on your lean canvas. Number 11 is about the cost structure. And cost structure is not only the cost of your product, but also your cost of rent, operations, employee salaries, insurances, accounting services. If you have a product and you deliver it, the cost of delivery services, all of those elements that make up the cost of your product can go into this part of your lean plan. And then the last, the last piece is key metrics. How are you going to measure your success? How are you going to know whether your plan is being successful or that you need to make adjustments? And just on that last point, if you don't have metrics, you don't know whether you're on target to achieve the goal or reach the destination you want. So the better your metrics in relation to your business, and the more frequently you look at those, the more likely you are to make the fine-tuning adjustments that you have to make over time to make sure that you're achieving your goals or your objectives. So again, those of you, I'm assuming, have seen this. Take yourself off mute if you have any comments or questions about the lean canvas template, because again, this can be a starting tool for a formal business plan, or it can be for those of you that don't need a formal, a detailed business plan to raise money. This is just a great outline for you to get a handle on your business or new product offering or so on. But any comments from any of you?
I did the lean canvas template and I just basically based it off of the business plan that I already put together. The
Yep.
only thing that I can't, that I guess that doesn't correlate at this moment in time is the cost structure and the key metrics. I can't do it this time. So I don't have any, because the company is not built yet, I don't have any key numbers that tell you how the business is doing or fixed or variable costs yet. I guess one probably won't typically have those until they actually have their business up and running. So I found that to be a bit of a challenge, I guess.
Yeah. Part of, I think, your struggle, Brian, with the online business is, again, defining what the customer's buying. If you can start defining your revenue stream, you can then say, well, what is it going to cost me to generate that revenue? Am I going to need people? Am I going to have to, do I need program developers? Do I need online servers? Do I need some type of service provider, an ISP, anything along that line to support my business? And what's that going to cost me?
Right. Yeah, no, I have that in my business plan, but like I said, it's a bit too early to know that. So
Yeah. Well, again, when you're starting out, some of this is, we say projected finance or projected costs and that, but in reality, they're guesses. They're estimates based on again, if you look at the other 10 boxes on that form, they're estimates, but based on an educated guess at that stage until you really start generating some revenue.
Right.
The other way is to look at again, competitors or people in similar businesses, and what have they done and how have they looked at their cost structure and what are the metrics that they're using.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't go up to a company like Yahoo and say, what are you paying every month for employees, insurance, servers, and all that stuff? So
There is, again, the federal government is wonderful in terms of the data that it provides, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics has all sorts of industry comparisons and industry data, average employee salaries, average gross margin, average net margin in different kinds of businesses.
what did you say that was called?
The Bureau of Labor Statistics is one place, the BLS, again, the government. Go to the Learning Center also on the Small Business Administration website, and you might find some links there also.
Ron,
Yes, Ken.
Andrew, one of our participants, was asking about or looking for additional examples of key metrics in terms of what's on the Lean Canvas. What kind of metrics would a business typically be looking at? He's looking for some examples.
Okay. An example would be number of new clients, average monthly fees collected, clients lost, expenses by category, average revenue per customer. Let's see, I'm looking at a couple of examples here. Expenses by category, you're going to break down your expenses into operating expenses such as rent, utilities, advertising dollars, and so on. One of the metrics had a veterinarian who had a metric of looking at, she used her cash flow numbers. So how much money she had in the bank in every month was a key metric for her. She wanted to make sure that she had enough money to meet payroll and buying supplies for her veterinary practice for the next 3 months. And one of the things that she did, she didn't pay attention to her cash flow one month, because when a salesman came in and said, if you buy these antibiotics a year's supply at one time, I can give you this 30% discount. She heard the 30% discount, bought the antibiotics. The outlay, however, cost her more than her monthly allocation for antibiotics was. So, just numbers. If she spent $500 a month, she was able to buy all these antibiotics for $3,000, but that $3,000 in 1 month, as soon as she looked at her cash flow, she said, oops, I'm going to be short in month 2 or 3 because I put all this money for these antibiotics now, and I don't have the revenue coming in until farther down the line. So there was that shortfall in her cash. The key metric of her monitoring her cash flow helped her understand that problem, and she very quickly dipped into a credit line that she had to cover her costs for that period of time. But the metric, the cash flow management metric, was something that helped her avoid disaster 2 or 3 months down the line because of that major purchase. other kinds of, if you're selling product, what's your turnover of your product? So the furniture store person, one of her metrics is inventory turnover. And what's the length of time a piece of furniture was on the showroom floor? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. The longer that furniture is sitting on the floor, as opposed to turning into revenue because you've sold it and moved it out of the store, it's costing you. So measuring what your inventory turnover is a critical metric in that kind of business. Does that help, Andrew?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Good. All right. Anyone want to try an elevator speech?
I would
Okay.
like,
Yes.
okay, so the business idea that I have is in offering professional or technical services to the government with regards to data collection, surveys. So the elevator pitch I have right now is I harness, let me see, I wrote it down. um, I harness what is relevant to you and leverage solutions to achieve results.
Okay. Any feedback? Is it Uchina?
Yeah, that's correct.
One thing I would say is that sounds awfully general to me. One of the things you might want to be is try to be a little bit more specific about what it is that you would do in terms of your solution. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I would definitely suggest how she uniquely does it, like through her personality. Um, because I'm sure other people do it, but what is it about her personality that makes it unique? Why would we be drawn to her?
Good, good. Yeah. Again, always think differentiation. Why am I different? What is unique about me? What's my unique value proposition is, the marketing term on this.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else want to, Gina, go ahead. Did you?
No, I was just saying thank you for the insight.
Okay. Anyone else want to share an elevator speech?
I don't want to share mine because I'm not great at it.
Okay.
But I can say that I feel it can make or break you, and you need to have it ready and have it practiced and be ready to go. Because when you start floundering around and you're not great at saying what you're doing, you lose them pretty quickly.
Yes, good. That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
In terms of that. And for those of you just starting out, what I would encourage you to do is to practice with people and the more you practice, the more effective you become at delivering the elevator speech and the concepts about your business and that. And as you think it, you refine it. Again, conciseness, clarity, and differentiation are the things that can make a big difference on it. Okay, let's move on to the formal business plan. So we've talked about a lean canvas, which is, again, this one-page idea of capturing all the elements on the journey from startup to a successful business. A formal business plan has some pretty defined elements. And what's neat about a formal business plan, from my experience, is that if you work on each of these little boxes around here, you'll find that over time you might be using the marketing plan with your sales team, and that can be a standalone kind of document itself. The financial forecast can be used to help you measure the business on an ongoing basis as information comes in. So the different elements of the business plan can be standalone indicators for you. But let's talk about the core elements of a formal business plan. I'm going to start with the purple kind of side of things. Normally, there's a section in the plan about market research. What does the market say about business, who the customers are, your competitors? And one of the greatest sources of information for those of you here in Greenville is the Greenville Library. The second floor of the main library, the Hughes branch, there's a whole section on business research, and they have a whole library that, matter of fact, SCORE helped set up a number of years ago. They also have online databases that are very useful. And those of you with a Greenville County Library card can access this online. But from there's the USA reference database, there's Dun & Bradstreet, and a number of other databases that will help you look at customers and competitors. So again, one example, in the Reference USA database, I had a client who wanted to do a home cleaning business. And she went to the Reference USA database and put in some search factors. She said, how many companies in a 25-mile radius of downtown Greenville are doing home cleaning businesses? They have 2 or more employees, and they make more than $25,000 a year. Well, out popped a list of 20 some odd companies, from Molly Maids to Molly Maids is the only name that comes to mind right now in terms of that example. But she had this whole list of potential competitors, and she was able to see, based on the data that was in the database, what their average payroll was, what their revenue stream was, because all of this is public information. People have to file most of this information that's available. And Brian, going back to you, there might be something there just dawned on me in some of these databases. The research librarians on that second floor at the Hughes branch are tremendously helpful in terms of helping you or directing you in doing some of this market research you might have about customers and about competition.
Yeah, I don't really, me personally, I already know my competition, and I
Okay.
know my customers, and I've done my, my demographical, who I want to target, who's my ideal customer. I've already done all that.
Okay, good.
The information that I would specifically need is, I don't think is going to be available, which is, again, like, I would need to be able to go to a company like Yahoo and say, how much per month are you spending on server farms? And I would need them to give me a number. How much are you paying employee? Like, how much is your labor every year? How, like how many employees do you have that work on this particular part of your company? So my whole business revolves around fantasy sports. So I would have to target the Yahoo fantasy aspect of it and say, like, how much server space do you dedicate to your fantasy sports part of your business? How much are you paying per month in, servers? And I don't think anyone's going to give you that information. So.
Have you read any of the articles on fantasy sports that have been in the Wall Street Journal in the last year?
Just what I've read online.
Yeah, I'd, well, the articles are all posted online, but again, in some of those articles on something like fantasy sports, again, the Wall Street Journal references or describes companies and describes some information. It may not be as precise as you like, but it might lead you to other sources of data based on some of those kinds of articles. So the key to market research is not that you're going to have all the answers that you want, but what you're going to do is to be able to make a better educated description of customers buying behaviors, competition, strengths, weaknesses, and the opportunities you might have around competitors, and go from there. That's the purpose of the research, is to strengthen your position, to build on your strengths of your company, overcome the weaknesses of your own company, and perhaps identify new opportunities that you may not have thought about as you conceptualized your business. You can also identify threats. So some of you are familiar with SWOT analysis, SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But those are the 4 elements to think about with respect to your competition and with respect to your own company as you frame your business plan. The other formal element of the business plan on this right-hand side then are, what are your products and service offerings, and defining them fairly specifically. So it's interesting on this point. The client I had who's opening a furniture store went to a lender, and the lender and she had a business plan, and I think it's about a 15-page business plan, and she and I thought it was really well done. And she went to the lender, and the lender said, what I don't see here are the specific products and costs and delivery services that you're going to provide in your business. Now, she talked about dining sets, mattresses, living room sets, and whatever the 4th category was, I've forgotten that now. But the lender said, not good enough. I want to see an appendix in your plan that identifies what brand you're going to use. Is it going to be Ethan Allen? Is it going to be Baker? Is it going to be Henredin? Who's the manufacturer of the furniture? How much are they going to cost? What are their terms in terms of purchasing? You're purchasing from them. How soon are they going to want the money? Is it going to be cash on delivery when they deliver the product to you? Or will they deliver it and then we'll expect payment in 30 days? And that those are kind of the level of detail that might be required in some business plans, again, based on how this business plan is being used. And normally, if you have to go into a formal business plan, it's to borrow money. And so different bankers, different lenders will ask for different levels of detail. Continuing on down though, once you talk about your research, your competitors, customers, products, all that's kind of synthesized into a marketing plan that says, how am I going to address the channels to get to my customers? What forms of marketing am I going to use? How am I going to develop an overall strategy to go after those customers in a way that's going to generate the expected revenue? The marketing plan needs to be able to tell the story to whoever's lending you money, for example, that says, if we lend this person $10,000, they're very clear about how they're going to generate $20,000 in revenue based on customers and products and services. So that's the marketing side of the formal business plan. Any questions on that?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Where does other things like taxes or legal legal support, of course, depending on the type of business, where in the plan do those do they go in?
Often it's in operations. As you're operating, what it says, I just put the screen up here. Any special licenses required, any kind of legal issues that might be there. The cost of those services are in your financial plan, but it's when you're operating your business. Are you looking for something specific in that?
No, not really. I just wanted to know whether it's important to include in a business plan, whether or not one has considered any legal, potential legal issues that may come up, or any issues regarding taxes or accounting and all that. So I was just thinking off the top of my head whether that was something that one should consider including a business plan or not.
I'll touch on the taxes in a bit, but things like legal issues, regulatory issues are often in the operations part of the plan. And let me just go back here. So the right-hand side, the purple side of this chart is customers, products, and marketing that. The gold color on the left-hand side is all of those elements that are going to be how you run the business. And included in there would be legal, zoning, professional services. An example in the operations side of the business, the vegan food subscription service that my client had developed, and she's up in operation and doing well, was doing well until the pandemic hit. But what she had to deal with was the Department of Health and Environmental Control here in the state of South Carolina, DHEC. She had to have a licensed kitchen in which to prepare her food. She had to have containers and distribution that met certain DHEC requirements for temperature of the food and storage requirements of the food. She had labeling requirements on the food that were all necessary. Most retail businesses will have to think about how are we going to collect sales taxes, and then the payment of those sales taxes would be built into your financial plan. But again, you would have to set up as part of your operation, how are we going to handle our bookkeeping requirements, for example, so that we can report the sales tax. That's all in the operations element of the plan.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me jump from the marketing to the gold side. So So in the formal business plan, one of the elements in the first part of the plan is a description of the business. And what this does is it goes into kind of an overview of what the business is about, where you are in the business cycle, startup versus expanding versus maintenance mode, and that what's your legal structure? So are you going to be a sole proprietor? Are you going to be a limited liability corporation, a partnership, or a full-blown corporation? Each of those different forms of structure, again, if you go to the SBA website, it talks about the pros and cons of each of those structures. The majority of you probably would be in a sole proprietor or a LLC, a limited liability corporation. Sole proprietor there's not a formal legal structure. Your income taxes usually are reported on Schedule C of your 1040, your individual income tax filing, and that an LLC, the purpose of an LLC is that it gives you just what the title is, limited liability protection, and you file with the Secretary of State here in South Carolina. There's a website for the Secretary of State and links to an LLC form. Last time I checked, it was $110 unless they've raised the fee. It's a 3-page form, and it asks you about your business, where it's headquartered, and so on. And then the Secretary of State gives you a charter once they see that $110. A corporate structure itself is fairly complex. It's not for most small businesses, it's not a direction that most businesses want to take on because of the administrative requirements. Partnership, just to comment on partnership, and that is if you are going into a partnership with another person, even your spouse, get a partnership agreement, spend some money with a lawyer to write up a partnership agreement. What are the shares? Who are the decision makers? How will decisions be made? If one of you is disabled or dies, what happens to the partnership? Had a client who he and his best friend started a business selling golf equipment. One of the partners died, and the wife inherited it, and the other partner said, "I don't want to work with his wife. My best friend, loved him dearly, and we had a good business arrangement, but he just had a problem working with the other person, and the business wound up taking a real hit because they couldn't agree on things in that situation, and there was no clear partnership agreement that talked about successors and how they would handle situations if someone had died in that situation. So again, this description of the business, a few pages in the formal business plan. The lender particularly is going to look at what's the status, where are you in the business cycle, and then what your legal structure is are going to be a key piece that they're going to look at in this section. And then your uniqueness or your differentiation. The operating aspect of the plan is where you're going to locate, are you going to buy or lease real estate? How are you going to deal with the zoning requirements, DHEC requirements, any other legal regulation in that? What's the material and equipment that you're going to need? What are their costs in that? Any special licenses required in that? And then how are you going to run all of this on a day-to-day basis? If you have staff, how are you going to manage the staffing? Who are the owners? This is an important, this personnel section, even if you don't have staff, what you want to do is this is where you describe yourself as the owner. And what are the key background, your experience, your skills? Again, if the business plan is used for financing, a lender is going to look at this and say, who are the key people here? And do they know anything about this business? And, are they credit worthy? They're going to check that, of course, but based on what the write-up is, do we want to go ahead with this person? Again, if your whole background is in accounting and everything, but you're opening a food truck, a lender might ask, does this make sense? And they're going to probe that experience level and see whether it makes sense. Only because it's recent. I'll go back to the furniture example. My client there has worked in the business for 10 years. She's been $1 million a year salesperson in a major furniture company. She has a track record of both selling and managing a furniture operation, and that's the kind of background and skill that develops real credibility among your lenders. This is also where you put help from other sources. Who's your accountant? Who's your banker? Insurance broker, lawyer, so on. That is useful again for whoever's reading the plan to have some sense of what kind of support you have. Again, I'm going to jump now to the financial forecast.
Hey,
And then
Ron,
Yes.
I just have a quick question about the last slide. Is it okay on the other resources to like put a score on there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been known to be in a few business plans like this in the past. And again, there's SCORE, there's the Small Business Development Center, other mentors. I've had some clients who had people in business in other industries, but they have a reputation for being solid business people, and they're mentors to some entrepreneurs, to an entrepreneur. And that person starting the business said, can I put your name in? And the successful business person who was known in the community said, sure. That again builds credibility. And that's part of what you want to do with those ancillary services, is build credibility for yourself. Okay. I'm going to assume that folks, you'll just disappear if you need a break or anything like that, and I'll keep rolling here. The third element, so one side was customers and ultimately resulting in a marketing plan. The other side of that business plan was your operational aspect of it. The third major element of a business plan are your financial projections. And a couple of things here that's important. A lot of people start hearing about finance and accounting, and they really get antsy when it comes to starting a business. But if there's anything that those of you that are interested in starting a business, take an online course on finance and accounting for non-financial people. There are a number of books. There's Accounting for Dummies. But if you don't understand the business or the language of finance and accounting, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting your ability to be on top of a major tool in managing and running your business. So again, that's my commercial for learning something about finance and accounting. You don't have to be an accountant, but you certainly need to understand what revenue is, what costs are, what profit is. If you talk about margins, what are margins? What's the dynamic of cash flow through the course of a year that can help me understand whether my business is generating enough money to pay my bills in the months ahead, and so on. Those are critical. And again, lack of planning, and then lack of clear financing and capitalization were the two elements for businesses failing, the top two. And so this area is something that, from my experience, probably should be the number one, because people start, if they're not on top of the finances, they can spiral down without even realizing it. So again, when it comes to what's in the financial plan, typically there are four major categories of financial forms that are going to be asked for. One is going to be a personal financial status. Second is a summary of what do you need the money for? So what are your overall financial needs? Most of the time you have to use some of your own money, borrow some money. And so what are the sources of your funds and how are you going to use those? And then finally, looking at the business, projecting out a couple of years, what's the revenue stream going to look like? What's my cost structure? What are my profits going to look like? And I'm going to go into each one of these in a little bit more depth. So personal financial statements. In your business plan, again, this is on the assumption you're going in to borrow some money. Your personal financial position, they're going to want a personal financial statement. So what cash do you have, savings account, checking account, and so on? What investments do you have? Do you own any property? What bills do you have? Second thing is they're going to look at your credit and your credit score. If you have a credit rating that has been dinged by late payments or other issues, and that, try to fix your credit before you go to a lender, and boost that credit score. There's a huge difference between a borrower in terms of the rates that you'll get if your credit score is 650 versus 750, 750 being the higher one, or 850. Right now, it fluctuates, but 2008, 2009, we went through a serious recession. At that period of time, anybody with less than about a 725 credit score, most banks wouldn't talk to. Nowadays, I was talking to a community banker, and they're considering some people with credit scores of 650, and those people being on an upward trend. But try to fix your credit rating before you go in to borrow money. It saves a lot of hassle. They're going to look at your personal assessment and how much money are you putting into this business, and what are you willing to risk? So the minimum is generally 20%. So again, if your business requires $100,000, that means you need to be able to go in with $20,000 of your own money. It's showing the banker that you're willing to risk that $20,000, and that you're putting an investment in. I am unaware, and I'll defer to Ken or Fred if they have experienced it elsewhere, but I'm unaware of any startup business where you can start a business where you have to borrow money with less than about 20% of your own money in it.
That would be my experience as well, Ron.
Okay, yeah, and it's, a lot of people assume that oh, I want to start a business and there's free money out there. There isn't free money, and there are no such things as grants that typically would be available. There are some esoteric grants. So if you've developed a formula to make biofuels and out of earthworms and can generate a huge profit from that business, the Department of Energy might have a grant for that kind of research, but the vast majority of small business people to open a retail business, an online business, there aren't grants available to speak of.
The other thing I would say about is the level of collateral that can be provided can sometimes impact how much a lender is willing to borrow, to lend.
Yes, yes. And collateral basically is, what are you going to put up your house? Very often entrepreneurs, put a house, a car, assets, other kinds of assets, stock, savings, and so on. So anyway, personal financial status is a key element, particularly for a small business person. You don't see this so much if you have a larger company where you're trying to borrow money. They're going to look at the company performance. But as an entrepreneur starting out, the only thing that they can go on, that a lender can go on, is your personal financial status. That's a major determinant in a small business loan.
Quick question, Ron.
Yes.
Regarding collaterals, does it have to equate to the amount that one intends to borrow?
Sometimes. It will vary again on how much you're putting into the business in terms of cash. And the collateral is used to secure the remainder of the loan. If you're using, if the bank, for example, is working with the SBA and you have an SBA guaranteed loan, the SBA has different requirements for collateral before they would guarantee a loan up to 90%. So, there's no clear-cut answer. It depends on the situation, what the collateral is, how much you're borrowing, how much cash you're putting into it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So again, I'm going down those four elements of in developing your financial projections. The next set of financial information that you need to provide in your business plan are your startup or your planned expansion costs. Again, if depending on what your business is, had a client who wanted to open a yoga studio, and a major piece of her startup costs was leasehold improvements. She had a site picked out, but it was an empty shell. And working with the landlord gave her a certain amount of money to paint in that, but she wanted walls built. She had to do an ADA, Americans Disability Act, requirements for access to the building and for restrooms in the building. And those were all leasehold improvements that she had to make. So she had to build those into her startup costs for that facility. A major one, if you have a retail business and you're selling product, is your initial inventory cost. signage and advertising, website design, and that this is often underestimated. But again, when you start a business, nobody knows who you are. So getting your name out there and name recognition becomes a major startup requirement. And your advertising budget becomes a major startup costs and that. Then you also want to have a little money tucked aside for those unexpected costs that crop up invariably. An example, the vegan restaurant person, she thought she'd have DHEC, Department of Health, approval for her kitchen in March. They didn't come through until May. She had to dip into reserves to pay the rent on her kitchen for those 2 months with no revenue coming in. So again, that she dipped into the reserves, her startup reserves because of that. Capital expenditures are those things that require a major investment. It might be delivery trucks for the furniture company. It might be a van for the vegan food distributor. It might be in a retail store, had a client who opened a boutique, all the shelving, display cases, setting up all those fixtures and equipment. Sometimes there may be a requirement or an opportunity to buy the building, the property, and so real estate might be a major expense that you would go into that you'd want to use the money for in your financing. Third category is working capital, and this is the money you're going to use on a day-to-day basis to finance your inventory, to pay your rent, your utilities, miscellaneous things. You need some of that working capital if you give people credit and they don't pay you for 30, 60, 90 days, you're carrying those costs for that period of time. So you need money essentially in the bank to cover those costs and that. But you need to tell the lender in each of these three categories what your business is going to be like and what your requirements are in these areas so that they can make judgments. Often when you're starting out, again, I want to jump to the startup costs, but a lot of people, when they look at startup costs, they say, well, what's in that? And here are some of the things that are in there. We've talked about most of these things, but on the left-hand side are, what are my fixed costs that I'm going to invest in? If you're not buying land or buildings, you're renting. So if you're renting, do you have costs associated with improving that facility in some way, shape, or form? What's the equipment and so on? Other things that under furniture and fixtures or equipment, again, printers, computers, customer terminals, all those sorts of things that have a longer shelf life would be on this left-hand side of the startup costs. Your operating costs, are you going to have a few people helping you set up the business? If it's a retail business, training people, setting up the displays, so on. Might be salaries that you have to worry about. Insurances, normally when you launch a business, you're going to have some type of typically liability insurance, and that's normally prepaid. Inventory, legal costs, we've talked about those. Licenses vary. So for example, here in Greenville County, if you're in the county itself, you do not need a business license. If you do business in Greenville, Simpsonville, Greer, any of the cities require business licenses. So again, my vegan client had to have licenses in 3 different cities because she intended to market and sell and deliver in those cities on a regular basis. All right,
What about if you're like me and it's online and it can be global, but you don't have a brick and mortar store?
You're not retail though, typically, and most of the business licenses that we talk about are for retail type establishments. I don't know, Ken, do you, the online support businesses that would be global, typically, it's hard to track those businesses, so there's generally not a licensing requirement. There's a registration requirement with the Secretary of State, which I think is $5, something like that, for your name and just a
So
registration.
Ron, you're referring to an online business? Is that?
Yes,
Well, there may be a license requirement depending on what kind of, I mean, there must be some arrangement to have an office or a facility, some type of physical presence, which may require a license depending where you are.
yeah. Honestly, don't know the answer to that one. If you're not selling product but service, it becomes a little, it's a gray area. And again, when in doubt, I'd look at the Secretary of State website. They list all the businesses that are required licenses. I know if you sell product online between different states, you're required to collect sales tax for all those different states to which you sell that have a sales tax requirement.
It's not a physical product.
Yeah, that's why I don't know what the,
Think
Taxing
Facebook
license.
without a headquarters.
pardon?
I said, think Facebook, but without a headquarters.
Yeah, but you have a place, don't you? Are you
I mean, I'm a
totally
human
cloud-based?
being and I have a place I call home. So, but
Well, you must establish some type of business address, right?
yeah, I can establish my home as the business address, but
Sure.
if I'm not selling a physical product, I'm just selling a service. Do I have to pay different state sales taxes? Do I have to file more than one business license? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and this is still an area of developing legal and state requirements. So for example, Amazon was selling books all over the country for the longest time without collecting sales tax. Finally, state legislatures passed requirements that they pay. So, every year, whether you realize it or not, Amazon gives you a statement that says how many books you bought in the state of South Carolina, and for which they may not have collected sales tax, and you have an obligation to pay the state of South Carolina.
I guess that's a question to ask a lawyer then.
Yeah.
Well, just in general, services usually aren't subject to sales tax, but that's not always true. It really depends on the state. Every state has different rules about what's subject to sales tax and what isn't. Generally speaking, services usually are not.
Yeah.
But there are exceptions to that. So if you're operating in South Carolina, that would be the first place to start is what I'm doing subject to sales tax or not. And as far as business license, it's likely to be based on your location and the type of business you're in. Not even if you're in a city that requires licenses, it's not for everything.
Yeah. And again, when in doubt, look at the Secretary of State for the South Carolina, or the city has a small business licensing requirement, and list the kind of businesses that require.
Well, hopefully there's somebody there that you can physically talk to, because I've been on the SBA's website and I've looked at forms and, you know, I kind of feel like you needed to have an education in law, contract law to understand some of these forms. So like I remember I was reading about copyrights, and it was like, oh, you got like all these different classes of copyrights, and depending on how many classes you have, it could be anywhere from $400 to $1,000, and then it was just like there was like a billion different forms to fill out. So again, hopefully there's somebody there that you can physically talk to that can kind of guide you to this. Otherwise, I think it's going to have to come down to getting a hold of an accountant or a lawyer and trying to get answers to this stuff. So
Yeah. I think at some point in time, the kind of business you're talking about, it probably would make sense for you to talk to an intellectual property
oh
attorney.
yeah, I definitely got to do that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
on my next to-do list. Actually.
That would be useful. So oops, I skipped this one. So when you look at all your startup costs, this little worksheet shows different sources of funding that clients often use. Your equity, how much cash you're putting into the business. Are you going to have outside investors? Are you going to borrow money? Where is it coming from? Although it's on their credit card debt, and some entrepreneurs use credit card debt, we highly recommend against it. It's probably the highest cost debt that you can have in terms of borrowing. But all those sources will total what you need for the business. And then based on the plan, and what you have to look at is, or your funding sources, and then you have to look at your plan and say, well, how much is it going to cost me to start this business? And that's what you go to a lender for. The sources of all the funds, and sometimes people have a lot of savings that they can invest in the business. We see a lot of veterans, for example, who are getting out of the military, and they have a little nest egg of savings as they start their business. So they put that personal investment into their business. Family members are often a great source for startup businesses. Private investors or venture capital investors are other sources. What I would say is, whenever you have an investor in your business, the key thing is that you're giving up ownership to that investor in some form or another. If it's stock, or if it's a commitment or a share of the business, they're part owners with you in it. If you borrow money, that's not an ownership interest. It's an indebtedness that you wind up having to pay back. But sometimes that gives you more control over your business and the ultimate profitability of your business as you go along. So again, as you think about where's the money coming from, these are different sources that you can think about. And then in the plan, you're going to talk about how are we going to use this. This is very important to specify not only where the money's coming from and being clear, this is mine, this is my uncle's, this is an investor, I anticipate getting this loan from you, and this is how we're going to use that money. The furniture store person I just mentioned, in a couple of examples, the lender came back to her and said, I understand the sources of money, but I'm not clear about the uses of the funds that you're going to use versus the bank's money, particularly around your inventory. Who's going to buy the initial inventory? Is it going to be the bank's money, or is it going to be your money? And And then the other startup costs that you have delineated, who's going to be the source of funds for those. And then with all of that, you do something wonderful here called a financial projection. And this will be the financial plan portion of your business plan. It'll include your personal financial statements, a cash flow statement, a profit and loss statement that projects out typically 2 to 3 years, a balance sheet, a startup cost. And I want to just skip to a template here. And I'm going to, on the Piedmont Score website, there's a tab for business planning. If you go to that tab, there are resources in there. One of them is this Excel spreadsheet. And do you all see something that says enter information for your company in the yellow and shaded boxes below? Is that appearing? And then read directions. And it has a bunch of gold tabs on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me talk about that because this is a nested Excel spreadsheet form. You can put your name in this form, company name, when you want to start your business, what year you're going to start the business, and it'll automatically populate that information to each of the forms then that you have to fill out, at least in the top. So this is where you can enter your all your startup costs, all your pre-opening costs, and that, how much you're going to put in, how much you're going to borrow, all of that's in the form here. And that then becomes, it then populates some of the rest of the forms, and is a great tool to very effectively minimize the amount of entries in these financial spreadsheets. This is a tab, it's much smaller than you want to increase. But this is where you define your product line, how you sell the different units of your product or service offering, what's the unit of price, sales price, and then all you have to do is in the orange lines as you go down for each product, for each month, you enter in the number of units that you sell, and it automatically populates and calculates the cost of the total sales, the cost of sales, and then gives you the total sales down at the very bottom. Very useful tool. Highly recommend it for those of you that are selling either services or products. There's a profit and loss statement here. Again, and what this shows is it shows your expenses, total expenses for the year. I'm sorry, these are operating expenses. Other expenses that you have in your business. And that cash flow is, again, at the beginning of each month. How much money do I have in cash at the beginning? Where's it going through the month? What do I have left at the end of the month? And again, this will be populated from some of the other forms that you have. Then the income statement, which is way too small, takes all of that information from those other sheets and said, here's my total revenue, this minus what it costs to manufacture those goods or services. That's my gross margin. Then from that, I subtract my payroll, my operating expenses, including rent and everything. And from there, I get my income before some of the other expenses like my long-term loans and that. And from this, I can then see at the end my net income before income tax, there's a formula in here for income tax, and then my net profit after tax. Again, this is a tool that's online at our website at piedmont.score.org under the financial planning template. And a tool that I highly recommend. So let me jump back to this screen. Oops. All right. And that becomes the financial element of your business plan. So let me jump back up here.
Ron, I have a couple of quick questions with regards to the
Fire
financial.
away.
So for startups like me, who obviously do not have, we don't have a track record or anything, where do we get the numbers, the estimates? Like, where would you, what are some sources to acquire or, like get a good sense of what the projections are likely to be?
What
then-
are you selling?
Well, in my own case, I'm offering a service. So, depending on, I haven't really thought it out, but I was just, kind of wondering what I would use as my project. Like, where would am I?
Okay, selling a service. I had a training and consulting business. So basically we're selling time for the most part. And so in terms of your financial projections, you're looking at, when you look at your available time, what you can charge the customer for is typically that time that you're with the customer or doing work away from the customer that's directly related to whatever your time with the customer is. So if I'm doing a sales training program as an example, the 5 days I might be doing a sales training is I could say 40 hours for that sales training program at X hundreds of dollars per hour. And that would be my revenue estimate for that service offering. Now, to do that sales training program, my cost that I might have to do is I might have to put in 20 hours of design and development. That is my cost, unless the client and I have agreed that they're going to pay a certain amount for customization of that service. So instead of my cost being 20 hours, it may only be 10 hours, and I can charge 10 more hours to the client. So I bill them for 50 hours.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it is thinking through the business and the service offering you have. Say how much of that billable time, and billable time is what you can bill the client for. How can I maximize my billable time and minimize the other time that I'm devoting to my business? So in a 40-hour work week, ideally you'd want as many of those 40 hours billed to the client as you possibly could. And again, backing up, if you say, let's say you bill 20 hours to a client, what should I charge that client? And what I charge the client is based on how much money I want to make, how much the client's willing to pay, what my competitors are charging for a similar service, and that gives me an hourly rate then that I could multiplied times the 20 hours I'm billing.
Much
Clear?
one. Yeah, it's clear. The other question I had was in the business plan itself, when we're writing up the financials, is it necessary to justify how we came up with the numbers or not?
You will be asked for assumptions for each of those forms. Let me jump back down here. There's very often there in the plan, there's another sheet here that you'd have for your assumptions for your profit and loss, your revenue stream, and so on. So just as I went through the example of the billable hours and that, what you would do is you would, it would be useful for you just to put those assumptions on a piece of paper and have it available for the lender.
I'm sorry, the assumptions for what?
What your assumptions for revenue, for example, you want to put your assumptions on a piece of paper that's attached as an appendix to the business plan that says, here are my assumptions about my revenue stream. Furniture example. My client listed the number of mattresses she was going to sell per month, and that she showed how much revenue and what the costs of those were. And it varied from month to month. And what she did is in an assumption page, she said, April, May, and June, based on my experience, are heavy months because people are buying furniture or buying bedding, and that September and October, a lot of college students are going back to school. That's another period for the cyclicality assumptions on my mattress sales. So those numbers go up. December, January, and February are dead months. That's why the numbers went down.
Okay, got it.
So she's explaining the numbers with some text.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a consulting, so for a consulting, like what types of assumptions can I make? Like,
well, a couple of assumptions on a consulting time would be what you'd have to look at what your kind of service offering is, but in the industry, and you say there's a certain amount of administrative time that's required for every client-facing hour. So again, a nurse practitioner, for example, who might have a visiting nurse business and works for a number of or works independently and makes house calls based on doctor's recommendations. She knows that she has to. An assumption would be she has at least 1 hour of administrative work, paperwork, and everything as far as her cost for every client-facing hour. So in terms of her charging, an assumption in her revenue would be, I have to charge double the amount of time to cover my cost. So if it costs me 1 hour of time before I see the client, I see the client, I need to double my time to have a reasonable amount of revenue to cover my cost. So I can't charge my client 1 hour, I have to charge them 2 hours, or I have to price it. I have to have a price for 2 hours to cover 2 hours of my time. Consulting is something that let me put it a different way. That wasn't clear. Client facing $50. It costs me $50 to do an administrative setup to visit a client. I could then say, I'm going to spend an hour with the client, but I've put $50 into it. I can't charge the same $50 to the client because I'd break even. I wouldn't make any money. So I have to charge the client for that 1 hour $100. That way I've made $50 in that process for that experience that the client has of my consulting service.
Okay, that makes sense. And then to the with regards to the how do I arrive at, the X amount of dollars I'm charging? Is that where market research would play a role? Like if
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Kind of
Very
know
much
what
so.
my competition is charging, then I can, okay.
Let me just touch on the last element here, which is the executive summary. The executive summary is completed last. It's after you have your financials, your operating plan, all of your dynamics and that. But it's probably the most important part of the plan because this is a 1 or a 2 page, very clear, very crisp statement that says, here's the vision for my business. Here's the kind of outcome I expect in terms of meeting customer solutions and problems. Here's what I need in terms of money. This is what I forecast in terms of growth and profitability and that. And here's why we're a unique or differentiated kind of company. Our core values, the purpose and direction of our business, and why we should be lent this money. Again, this is a critical sales piece of your business plan, particularly if you're borrowing money, because this will be the first piece that a lender is going to look at. They're probably then going to jump to the financials, and then they'll look in the middle of the plan in between. And Ken, you've been in the business, so I'm not sure whether you would take exception to that. But my experience as a lender is look at the executive summary, look at the financials, and then I'll go into the details of the other stuff.
Well, I think it's a way to attract interest, like you're identifying on your slide there. I mean, you're trying to get interest so that they want to look at the details
Yeah,
because they're impressed by the initial what they're reading about initially.
just a little finance and accounting humor. You have your own pool of money, but again, be cautious about when you dive into it if your business is successful. And then in summary here, there is no magic to a business plan. There are a lot of different formats and books out there on business planning. Again, if you check with our Piedmont Score website, there are a couple of templates in there. There's the lean canvas form that you have. The SBA website is also an excellent one, and they have different tools that are available. Those of you in South Carolina, the state of South Carolina, the business development section of the governor's office has a website called Business One Stop. And I think the website is bos-sc.gov. And it is a site that links where to get an employee identification number, an EIN, the Secretary of State, the different city licensing requirements, and other tools that are the Department of Revenue for the state and so on. But it's a great one source for all the forms and all the requirements that South Carolina has. So it's just put in Business One Stop South Carolina if that bos-sc.gov doesn't work for you. So that's it. Any final questions here? going.
No, that was informative. I definitely appreciate it. I'll probably take it again just to kind of let things soak in, but that was very good.
Good. All right. Well, thank you all very much and the best of luck to you and much success in your businesses.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for attending this evening.
Thank you.